We all know rail is being identified as a means of transport, not only from an economic perspective, but also from a sustainability perspective. So with that, we see a trend, an increase in trend around the globe for increase in rail transport, especially rail freight transport. However, when we consider the situation here in Sri Lanka, I'm just showing you figures back in 1934, 85 years ago, we used to have, if you go by the revenue earned by the Sri Lanka railways, the 57% of the revenue came from the rail freight. And whereas the latest annual report of the Sri Lankan Railways, what it tells us is that back in 2019, the revenue coming from rail freight has been just 7%. So this sets the background for the workshop, which we are holding today. So these are the objectives. Well, as knowing rail freight is not really being utilized as one of the prominent means of transportation. We have set these objectives for the workshop today. We will first review the current rail freight transport performance and understand the current issues and further potential of rail freight transport in Sri Lanka. Secondly, we have invited some eminent speakers from the Western countries. They will share the freight transport best practices in the West. And then we will jointly try to identify high-level strategies to overcome current challenges to improve rail freight transport in Sri Lanka. And finally, hopefully, we are looking at this interesting pace where to develop at least a framework for a white paper to increase the rail freight transport in Sri Lanka. Well, with that, we have invited an eminent panel of speakers today. We have 8 speakers lined up. We're going to start with Mr. Monty Ranatunga, the Secretary, Minister of Transport of Sri Lanka, who will speak about the vision of the Sri Lankan government in terms of promoting transportation and rail transport, particularly. Then we have Mr. J.I.D. Jayasundara, the General Manager of Sri Lanka Railways, who will speak about the current challenges as well as the opportunities of at the Sri Lanka Railways, particularly in terms of the freight transportation. Now you see, we start from the visionary level, then we get into the strategic level at the Sri Lankan Railways. Then we are moving to hear from the customers. Customers' voice is what is mostly important. So to representing the customers, we have Mr. Darshan De Silva, the Assistant Group General Manager from Prima Group, one of the companies who already uses rail freight to a great extent. And we also have Mr. Vatsara Vedage, who is an quarry expert from Siam City, Thailand, who the organization is again another organization who uses rail freight already. Now, having heard from the customers, we are also going to hear from a bit of an academic perspective. Dr. Navaratna Raja from the Department of Civil Engineering, University of Peradeniya here in Sri Lanka, will speak on behalf of the infrastructure issues, particularly in the track infrastructure. Then we have invited to hear from further upper part of the Nordic region, Dr. Philip Tretton, joining all the way from Luleå, Sweden, the beautiful city, who's representing the Railways Research Center, who will talk a little bit about the Swedish model, how they are collaborating the private sector and the rail service providers and some other organization in offering the services. We also have Dr. Matthias Asplund joining again from Sweden, from Trafikverket, which is the Swedish transport administration, who will also talk about particularly about the technicalities of the track maintenance. I hopefully we will see some connection with what Dr. Navaraja is going to talk about. And we also have further west, Dr. Krishna Jha joining from USA, who's representing the Optim, Texas, who will talk about how to optimize the existing network in the rail freight. With that, we have also invited, we will listen to the prominent panel of speakers which I presented on the earlier slide. We have also invited resource persons, Dr. Karunananda from Department of Civil Engineering, Open University of Sri Lanka, again regarding infrastructure matters. Mr. Asela Patirana, who is an superintendent engineer from Sri Lankan Railways, especially to talk behalf of the operational issues. Mr. Nalina Dayananda, Head of Logistics, Prima, Ceylon, Sri Lanka. Then Mr. Nalina Tukorala from the same organization. Mr. Abhitissa Bandara, Logistic Manager, Ceylon Petroleum Storage and Logistics Limited, who is another customer of Sri Lankan freight, railway freight. We have also invited Mr. Manoj Jekanayake, Chief Miller from Serendip Flour Mills Private Limited, who is another potential customer of Sri Lankan Railways. Then we also have Dr. Asela Kulatinga from the head of the Department for Manufacturing and Industrial Engineering, University of Peradeniya, joining as resource persons during the panel discussion. Finally, I should also introduce Dr. Dhammika Seneviratne, who will be the moderator of today's session, who will be handling the panel discussion once the speeches are over. Dr. Dhammika Seneviratne is currently working as a senior scientific researcher attached to Tecnalia, Spain. He has over 20 years of experience in different fields, including as a motive power engineer at Sri Lankan Railways some years back.